Sharpie.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue with our media availability. We're now joined by Brad Keselowski, driver of the number 2 Reese Draw-Tide Ford. Brad, you are the defending champ of the STP 500. Can you talk a little bit about what that victory means to you and what it would mean to you if you got another win here?
Yeah, sure. It was winning last year was really, really special for me. This is a special track, with the history and tradition of the sport. So, having success here, kind of ties yourself to those legacies of, some of the founders of our sport, and it means a lot to me. There's, Martinsville is one of those races where I just feel like you don't kind of win it on luck. You got to really earn it, and I enjoy those types of races. I enjoy the type of challenge it is to race here and to compete here at the highest level. So it was really, really good, really, really fun, and I still have the clock in my house, which I get a good reminder once every hour of that day. So that sticks out to me, and would like to get another one.
Okay. Let's go ahead and open up to questions. We'll start up front and Mike.
Mike Hember, USA Today. You had 7 or 8 top 10s here before you got that win. Was it just mostly a matter of circumstance, or is winning here about sort of the last 20 laps and how you race around people?
Yeah, Mike, I think there was a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas. There probably was. I feel like I probably could have won the last 3 races here, and I'm a little disappointed I only won one of them. I kind of had made some mistakes and caught some bad breaks, and that's just kind of part of how this racetrack plays out sometimes. But we've been in position a lot over the last, I would say half a dozen or more races, and it didn't come together before that for a number of reasons, which was, a real bummer. But it finally did this spring or this last spring, and I feel like we'll have another great opportunity this time. But I think each weekend was probably a little bit different as to why it didn't come together. But we kept the faith that if we kept running, up front and in that position, it eventually would, and it did.
We'll go next to the corner, then to Kelly, and then to Mark.
Jacob Seelman, Speed Sport. Brad, your family has a lot of history in the sport. Do you have a particular memory with your dad in racing that sticks out to you?
Wow. It's like a psychologist question. Yeah, I think probably just being with your family when there's any kind of success and celebrating together is always really special, and those are the moments that stick out to me the most. There's that old saying that the heart grows fonder with time, and so as I've grown up and gotten older, I remember all the good stuff and have kind of forgotten about all the bad stuff of that in that way. So being around my family with the wins is probably the ones that stick out the most, whether it was my dad's one NASCAR win in the Truck Series or a few of his wins at the ARCA level. Those will always stand out to me the most.
We'll go next to Kelly, then to Mark.
Kelly Crandall, Racer.com. Brad, you mentioned you felt like you could have won the last 3 races here. If you go back and look at your stats over the last 5 races here at Martinsville, you've been one of the best in the series. Did you hit on a feel? Did you hit on a rhythm? When did you really start to feel like you had something here that you've been able to lead a bunch of laps and get that win?
Yeah, we had a couple of really good races here, I think in 14, in 15, and had a great shot at winning and just kind of learned from that and added a few more pieces to both the car side and my own side to grow from that. It takes so much to run well. There's so many different little styles and little, as a driver, and then little techniques along with the car and how it's prepared, that I think it's one of those things that you just kind of dial in, and we've got it dialed. And the thing about Martinsville is it's a track that's fairly consistent. There's some variables with the, of course, weather and the tires. But once you can hit the basics of it, I think you can kind of stay pretty close on the target. So it's maybe not a perfect answer, but I think a little bit of both the car and myself. Yeah, we come here with a lot of confidence for sure, Kelly. Yeah.
We'll go next to Mark.
Mark Garrow, Performance Racing Network. As a driver, you've sort of got a scouting report on all the guys that you drive against, sort of their tendencies and their likes, their dislikes. Were you surprised that Chase Elliott kind of roughed you up at the end of this race last fall to take the lead? It's something he hadn't done or shown in the past.
Well, I don't know if hadn't done is the right word, but or term. I was maybe a little surprised. I was a little more probably just disappointed to be in that situation. End of that race it was pretty clear that everybody was just going to run each other over, and it was just who didn't get ran over at the right time and right place, and we didn't pass that one. So it kind of is what it is.
We'll go here up front.
Hey, Brad. John Havron with ESPN Albuquerque. I watched the Facebook Live video, the Q&A you did earlier this week, and I saw one question was about you being an objective commentator when you're in the booth. Mm-hmm. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you like balance that versus when you're sitting here and you talk about if Toyota has an advantage or something like that? Like, you always seem very candid with your answers, but do you ever filter what exactly you're thinking or saying?
Yeah, without a doubt. This is my first question about being in the booth in the media center. It's kind of weird. When I've been very privileged to have those opportunities. My last opportunity to do that in the TV booth. I'll do the Hollywood Hotel, I think, in Talladega for the Xfinity Series, but that was my last opportunity last week, and people asked me about that, and I feel like when I'm in that situation and I can't be objective, that I look over, then there's two other people, and I let them handle it, and that feels like the proper way to me. Maybe that's not how everybody else would handle it, but if there's something I don't feel comfortable commenting on, there's some strength in numbers, and I feel like I don't always have to say anything up there. No problem.
We'll go next to the back.
Woody Kane with MRN. Brad, with Easter coming up in the off weekend, I was curious if you have a particular Easter memory that you want to pass along to Scarlett, and is she kind of getting to the age where she understands stuff like that a little better now?
Oh, she understands more than I want her to sometimes, so that's the great thing about having kids. Jeff, you're going to figure it out. Congrats, man. Yeah, I love Easter. It's one of my favorite holidays, with spraying and everything turning, and of course what Easter stands for. Beyond that, but for my family, we've always had a lot of fun on Easter. It's always been the guaranteed off week in racing, which we so much appreciate and hope to never lose. That said, we always like to do something together as a family to try to get outside, and whether that's Easter egg hunts or my family always liked to play croquet, so we still do that as a family, and that's been a lot of fun. It's kind of a weird thing to play, but I'm not really good at any other sport, so I enjoy that one. And you can wreck other people in croquet, so that's always a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed that part.
We'll go next up front.
Yeah, Brad, Al Pierce from Auto Week. You've never had an extended losing streak since you got to Penske. You've always won pretty consistently. Can you sympathize at all with what the 48 team is going through as a championship team? They're in their worst slump ever. You've never had that. Do you kind of feel for them?
Well, I don't know. It's hard to feel bad for a guy who's won 80-some races, right? Was he 80, 83? Hard to feel bad over that. I mean, there's a lot worse problems going on in the world. That said, I do know how frustrating it can be to be on a stretch where not only are you not winning, but you're not as competitive as you want to be. And that happens, right? And there's a number of reasons why it happens, and trying to figure that out is, quite honestly, more exhausting than trying to figure out how to go from fifth to first. So in a lot of ways, I sympathize with the effort that I'm sure they're putting in. But I also, understand that the sport has ebbs and flows, and guys that get ahead and guys that fall behind. It's just the first time that group's really fallen behind probably in their existence to this extent. But I don't expect it to last. So with respect to that, I wouldn't be too worried for them, and I'm guessing they're probably not too worried themselves.
We'll go next to Caleb, then to Jim and Jeff.
Caleb Whistler, kicking the tires. Looking forward to Texas in 2 weeks. What are your thoughts about going there with year 2 and with the repave?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the track has aged over the winter, whether the second groove will come in. I thought last year that the track did a phenomenal job of kind of doing their homework, prep work on the track to where we could run the second groove in both the spring and fall races, which not a lot of tracks do. So I thought they deserved a lot of credit for that. And we actually had one of the better repave races I think we've ever had. That said, I don't know what to expect in the second year. Generally, winners really affect the track. But a lot of that depends on, or seems to depend on the process that they've paved the tracks with. If you look at a track like Michigan, it hasn't changed at all, and it's coldest of winters up there. And they used whatever high-grade pavement they used to repave that track. And on the flip side, there's tracks like Pocono that in 4 or 5 years have really aged well. And so I don't know what Texas will be. I don't know what pavements they used or compounds or any of the scientific jargon for that to have a good answer for what it'll be like in year 2. But I do feel like that track has put a lot of work into the prep and trying to make it the best it can be, and hope they'll do that again.
We'll go up front to Jim.
Jim Utter, motorsport.com. You mentioned a little bit ago that you thought last fall's race, it became apparent that it was going to turn into people running over each other at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if you thought that is going to be, are you looking at that as being the new normal here? Or was that sort of, do you think that may have been specific to the fact that it was a playoff race?
I think it's, I struggle to say it's just because it was a playoff race. I think a lot about the 500, and I really haven't had the success in the Daytona 500 that I feel like as a team we're capable of. And it's really frustrating for sure. But, after we got back from Daytona, we wrecked out this past February. You do the debriefs and you talk to all the guys, and from a morale standpoint, it's really difficult when you look at races like that, because it gets really easy to be kind of lulled into a false sense of what matters, where perhaps this is more so probably on the restrictor plate tracks than anywhere else. Everybody gets a little lazy and starts to think, well, we don't have to have the fastest car, and we don't have to really study and do our homework, because at the end of these races, everybody's going to wreck, and whoever survives is going to win. It's really easy to get lulled into that. But for whatever reason, I think if you look more at the stats, more at the odds, that races like the restrictor plate tracks and races like here at Martinsville, although that'll happen from time to time, it's really not the norm. It's the rare occasions. It's the one out of every 3 or 4 races that turn into that. And you have to, kind of harden yourself from thinking that way. But then on the flip side, when they do happen, you have to recognize them and, be tough enough to move on and accept them for what they are. So, I thought Daytona was that way this year. It's been that way probably the last 2 years. But then the 2 years before that, it wasn't that way. It was a really good, strategic, well-run, well-driven race by the entire field. I suspect that Martinsville will cycle just like the plate tracks do, where you'll have races like we had this past fall once every 3 or 4 times. Then everybody comes away from it and says, that was dumb, that was crazy, I'm not going to do that again. and naturally, Jim, they forget about it and do it again about another year or 2 later. So I just think it's part of the ebbs and flows of racing. In some ways that makes it exciting and unpredictable. In other ways, it's entirely frustrating. And you just kind of have to live with it and roll with it.
Is it your job to come in and be prepared for both?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You try to be prepared for both. The thing that makes racing in a lot of ways so much different than other sports is that you have less control over your destiny. You know, you look at a football player or a basketball player, and they have so much control over hitting the shot. They have so much control over, you know, throwing the perfect pass or making the right move on the field. Where in racing, you can control your own move, but you can't control the moves of everyone else around you. And at any time, you know, that can ruin your day. So with respect to that, there's certainly a little bit more of a out of your own control factor, fate, whatever you want to call it, in motorsports that makes it, I think, somewhat compelling at times and also completely frustrating as a competitors at others.
And we'll wrap it up with Jeff.
Jeff Gluck from jeffgluck.com. So specifically about the move that wasn't in your control last year, I don't think it was in your control with Chase bumping you out of the way. How do you look back on that now that some time has passed? Did you ever have a chance to bring that up with him? I know he was engaged in his own controversy on the other side, but what did you think of everything that happened now?
Well, you know, I've had, 5-6 months? We've all had 5-6 months since Martinsville last time. Let's see, was that October? I don't know. I would expect that it'll come back the other way somewhere down the line. We're both going to be racing hopefully for a long time, and I'll make sure it does.
So thank you so much, Brad, and
Thanks,
good luck
guys.
this weekend.